The setlist had been on the wall for 3 weeks, every song placed with deliberate intention, the sequence tested in rehearsal, adjusted, tested again. By the night of the tribute concert in October 2008, the setlist on the wall of Michael Bublé's dressing room at the Hollywood Bowl represented approximately 90 hours of preparation. He folded it carefully and set it on the dressing table, 40 minutes before showtime. The show that 14,000 people would see that evening would not be the show that had been rehearsed. Michael had decided in the 40 minutes before he walked on stage to do something completely different from what had been planned for months. The reason was a phone call specifically, a call that had come in 3 hours earlier informing him that Frank Sinatra Jr. would be in the audience that evening. This information, which should by any reasonable calculation have been reassuring, a validation that the tribute was being taken seriously by the people closest to its subject, landed in Michael Bublé's chest like something more complicated than reassurance. He sat with it for 3 hours. He ran through the planned show in his mind. He thought about the specific song at the center of the tribute's design, My Way. He thought about what My Way meant to the Sinatra family, and what it would mean to perform it in front of Frank Sinatra's son, and what Frank Jr. would hear when he heard a young Canadian singer attempt to inhabit the most autobiographical song in his father's catalog. And then he made a decision that his musical director, Alan Chang, would describe afterward as the most unexpected thing he had ever witnessed in 20 years of live music. The concert at the Hollywood Bowl had been organized to celebrate the Sinatra centennial, 10 years ahead of the actual anniversary, beginning a decade-long series of events honoring what Frank Sinatra had meant to American music. Michael Bublé had been asked to headline because the answer to who, in the contemporary musical landscape, most authentically represented the tradition Sinatra had defined was not complicated. He had spent his entire career inhabiting that tradition, not imitating it, not applying it as a stylistic veneer, but genuinely living inside it, understanding it from the inside the way his grandfather Mitch Santaga had taught him, as a living emotional language rather than a historical artifact. He had accepted the invitation with the particular combination of enthusiasm and private terror that had characterized his relationship with the Sinatra legacy his entire career. Sinatra was not, for Michael, simply an influence. Sinatra was the standard, the voice his grandfather had held up as the definition of what music could be at its most honest, the benchmark against which everything Michael did was, at some level, measured. To perform a tribute to Frank Sinatra was not a professional engagement. It was a reckoning with everything he had been working toward since a boy sat still in a Burnaby living room and first heard what a voice could do when it was fully present. My Way had been placed at the climax, the penultimate song, in the position of maximum emotional weight. It was the right choice professionally, the song audiences expected, the song representing the peak of Sinatra's late career power. It was also the most dangerous song in the catalog for someone who was not Frank Sinatra to attempt, because My Way required something that technique could not provide. Having lived the specific kind of life the song described, with enough years and enough hard-won understanding to mean every word with the conviction it demanded. Michael, at 33, understood with uncomfortable clarity that the song was not yet his to sing in the way it needed to be sung, especially not in front of the person he was about to learn would be sitting in the audience. Frank Sinatra Jr. had been his father's musical director and conductor for the latter part of Sinatra's performing career. He had stood on hundreds of stages conducting the arrangements while his father sang them. He had heard every interpretation, every approach, every attempt by other artists to inhabit My Way. He was, in other words, the most qualified person on the planet to judge whether a performance was genuinely great or merely competent, and he was going to be sitting in the audience when Michael Bublé performed it. When the message came through that afternoon, Michael's first thought was not simple fear. It was the recognition that the performance he had prepared was not designed for this audience. He had prepared a tribute for people who loved Sinatra's music. Frank Jr. did not love it the way fans love it. He carried it differently, with the weight of someone for whom that music was not a source of pleasure but a form of inheritance. The most personal thing in the world, expressed through the most public medium available. Michael sat with this for 3 hours. He ran through My Way in his mind, not the notes, which he had rehearsed to automaticity, but the intention behind them. My Way was, at its core, a declaration of selfhood, a Man looking back and asserting he had lived on his own terms. You could not sing it as an exercise in interpretation. You had to mean it. You had to have something specific to mean, earned through living, not through study. The question was not whether he could sing it, it was whether he should, and if not, what instead. He sat in his dressing room with that question for 3 hours, and then he went looking for Alan Chang. The conversation with Alan Chang, 40 minutes before showtime, was brief. Michael found Alan in the corridor going over last-minute technical details. He asked him to step aside. Alan looked at his face and told the stage manager he'd be back in 5 minutes. "I'm not doing my way," Michael said. "Okay," Alan said. The word contained both acknowledgement and question. "I'm going to do Nancy instead, Nancy." With a laughing face, Alan was quiet. Nancy was not on the set list. It had never been discussed. It was a song Sinatra had recorded specifically for his daughter, deeply personal, a father's expression of love for his child, one of the most intimate things in the Sinatra catalog and one of the least performed in tribute contexts precisely because its intimacy resisted the grand interpretive gesture that tributes typically invited. Why? Alan asked, not as a challenge. As a genuine question, because Frank Jr. is going to be there, Michael said. My Way is Frank's song about himself, but Nancy is Frank's song about his family. Frank Jr. grew up hearing that song about his sister. I'm not Frank Sinatra. I can't sing My Way tonight with Frank's son in the room and mean it the right way, but I can sing Nancy and Frank. Jr. will know exactly what I'm doing and why before I've sung a single note. Alan looked at him for a moment, the look of someone who has just heard a logic that is simultaneously simple and exactly right. Then, "I'll need 15 minutes with the band." "You have 10, Michael said. What Alan Chang communicated to the band in those 10 minutes was not merely a change of song. It was a reorientation of the evening's intention, delivered in the compressed language of musicians who understand that the explanation needs to be short because the time to act on it is shorter. He explained what Michael had understood, that My Way required a kind of selfhood you could not borrow, that performing it in front of Frank Sinatra's son risked feeling like an imposition rather than a tribute. Nancy was different, a song about love rather than self-assertion. Universal in the way the best expressions of parental love are universal. It did not require you to be Frank Sinatra. It required only genuine understanding of what the song was about and the willingness to offer that understanding with complete sincerity. The musicians absorbed this quickly and adjusted without complaint, with the trust of people who had worked with Michael long enough to know that his counterintuitive decisions tended to reveal their logic in the performance. The arrangement they assembled in 10 minutes was not perfect, but it was honest, which was, as Michael had understood since his grandfather's living room in Burnaby, always more important than perfect. The show proceeded as planned through its first two-thirds. Michael performed a set demonstrating everything the tribute's organizers had hoped for, a young artist with genuine understanding of what made Sinatra's music great. The audience of 14,000 at the Hollywood Bowl received it with the warm enthusiasm of people watching someone do something well that they love seeing done well. The Bowl's open-air acoustic gave the music a quality indoor venues could not replicate, sound existing in real space, carried by October air, held by the surrounding hills. Frank Sinatra Jr. was in the audience. Michael knew this from the moment he walked on stage, not because he could see him, but because knowing he was there changed the quality of his attention throughout the set, not nerves exactly. The particular heightened consciousness of performing in front of someone whose judgment carries a different weight, the weight of personal investment, of genuine stake in what is being honored. He got through the set to the point where My Way had been planned. He paused. He looked out at the audience. He said, "I want to do something a little different from what you might expect right now." 14,000 people went quiet with the specific attention that forms when a performer signals a departure from the expected, not confusion, but presence. Whatever was coming, they would receive it fully. The opening notes of Nancy with the laughing face began, and something changed in the Hollywood Bowl. Not dramatically, not the kind of change that announces itself. Quieter, more specific. The audience became more focused. The particular quality of attention that forms when people recognize that something unexpected is happening that is also exactly right. Michael sang Nancy with the voice of someone who had chosen the song not for himself, but for someone in the room. Quality of offering, of giving rather than demonstrating, was present in every phrase. He was not performing his relationship to Sinatra's catalog. He was performing his understanding of what the song meant to a specific person sitting in the dark of the Hollywood Bowl and his respect for that person's relationship to it. He held back where the temptation to display vocal ability might have led another singer forward. He let the song be what it actually was. The song is, at its heart, simple, a father describing his daughter, the way she laughs, the specific quality of love between a parent and a child. Intimate in a way my way is not. My way reaches outward toward history, toward the assertion of a life fully lived. Nancy reaches inward toward one specific person, toward a love that exists in the private register and becomes universal only. Because the private, expressed with sufficient honesty, is always already universal, Michael sang it as if Frank Sinatra Jr. were the only person in the amphitheater. The 14,000 others were present and honored, but the specific direction of his intention was unmistakable. He was giving the song back to the person who had the most legitimate claim to it, returning an inheritance to its rightful holders. Frank Sinatra Jr. sat in the Hollywood Bowl and listened to Michael Bublé sing Nancy with the laughing face. He had heard the song performed hundreds of times in recordings, at tribute concerts, in private. He understood it from the inside in a way no outside observer could. What he heard from Michael Bublé was something he had not heard in a tribute context before, a performance that acknowledged his presence without addressing it. Directly, that gave the song to the family rather than taking it from the catalog, that understood the distinction between tribute and possession. After the concert, after the standing ovation, after Michael had made his way off stage, Frank Sinatra Jr. came backstage. He found Michael in the dressing room, extended his hand. Michael shook it. Frank Jr. looked at him for a moment with the direct, unhurried assessment of someone who has spent a lifetime around performers and learned to see past performance to the person performing. Then he said, "My father would have liked you." 7 words, carrying everything that needed to be said. Alan Chang heard the 7 words because he was standing in the dressing room doorway when they were spoken. He had been about to enter for the post-show debrief and had stopped at the sight of the 2 men, the handshake, the pause, the assessment. He stood there for the 7 words, then stepped back into the corridor without entering. He had witnessed hundreds of post-show moments across his career, congratulations from promoters, praise from fellow artists, appreciation from audiences in all the forms it takes. None of it had looked like what he had just seen through the doorway. The difference was in Frank Jr.'s face before he spoke, the specific quality of assessment preceding the words, the look of someone making a judgment that matters to them personally and deciding whether to say it. That look was not professional generosity. It was something that only arrived when the work had actually reached someone, when the performance had landed where it needed to land. Alan stood in that corridor and understood what Michael had understood 3 hours earlier. That the decision to fold up a setlist and do something different had been the only right decision, not professionally right, right in the way that honesty is right, without qualification, without exception. Michael Bublé has performed Sinatra's catalog hundreds of times since that October evening at the Hollywood Bowl. He has sung My Way at subsequent concerts. He has earned it, in the way you earn the right to a song by accumulating the life experience that makes the words true rather than merely available. He sings it now with the conviction of someone who knows what it means. But the song he thinks of most often when he thinks about that evening is not My Way. It is Nancy. It is the 10 minutes in a corridor with Alan Chang, and the decision made without certainty, and the 7 words from a man who had the most personal relationship to what was being honored. Those words are not a review of a performance. They are a recognition that the person delivering the tribute understood what the tribute was actually for. The lesson is simple to state and complicated to apply. Honoring a legacy means understanding what it actually is, not what it looks like from the outside. The Sinatra legacy from the outside looks like My Way, the grand statement, the culminating declaration. From the inside, where Frank Jr. lived, it looked more like Nancy, the intimate expression, the specific love, the private made briefly public and then returned to its rightful owners. Michael had arrived at the Hollywood Bowl prepared to give the audience My Way. He understood in the hours before showtime that the person he needed to honor first was the one with the most personal connection to what was being honored. He has said in interviews since that the decision to sing the right song instead of the expected song was the most important artistic decision of his career to that point. Mitch Santaga had pointed at Sinatra and said, "This is what honesty in music sounds like." At the Hollywood Bowl in 2008, his grandson extended that lesson to cover something larger, that honoring an inheritance means understanding what it belongs to and giving it back intact and respected to the people who hold it most rightfully. Frank Sinatra Jr. came backstage and said 7 words. They were enough. The decision to fold up that setlist 40 minutes before showtime had been the right one, the one that honesty required.